Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is here with me now. Deputy Prime Minister, thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for being with me.
I want to start with the capital gains tax changes. There has been some pushback from the business community already since this has happened, saying this sends the wrong signal. Directionally, it's a bad idea that capital now is being taxed at a higher rate than it was, and that this sends the wrong message to a country that has a productivity problem. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I want to say for everyone who is listening to us, something I said in the House, principal residences remain 100% free of any tax on capital gains. I think that's really, really important. Second thing I'll say is right behind us is a portrait of John Diefenbaker. And it was actually John Diefenbaker who first broached the idea of taxing capital gains in Canada. It was the Royal Commission under his prime ministership, chaired by Kenneth Carter, that came up with the notion we needed to tax capital gains. And what Ken Carter said is, a buck is a buck is a buck. The fact is, today in Canada, we have a tax system where it is possible for a nurse or a carpenter to pay a higher marginal rate of tax than a multimillionaire. And that just isn't fair. So, this is about fairness. It's about fairness for Canadians. It's about generational fairness.
Right.
And it's also about being sure that the investments we make, and Canada needs investments. Canada urgently needs investments in housing, in affordability, in economic productivity. We know we need to do that. We believe in doing it in an economically responsible way. That means raising revenue. This is the fair way to do it, and this is the way to do it that maintains our competitiveness when it comes to business investment.
Right, but coming into this, the argument was you needed to deal with the affordability of the housing crisis. You needed to maintain the fiscal track that you'd set for yourself in the fall economic
And we've done
statement.
those.
But you needed to deal with growth and productivity. And this is the reaction so far from some economists we've spoken with and business leaders that there's not enough on the productivity side, and that taxing capital gains like this may discourage investment and globally sends a signal that Canada maybe isn't the place for your money.
Well, if we want to talk about the global signal, let's be really clear that Canada continues to have the lowest marginal effective tax rate, known as METR, and that is the effective tax rate on each additional dollar invested in the economy. We are lower than any G7 country, lower than the OECD average. This tax measure was chosen to not affect the METR. When it comes to capital gains, at our new level, Canada is lower than California. We are lower than New York City. Those are two areas that attract a lot of investment, have a lot of innovation. I do agree we need to invest in the productive capacity of the country. We need to invest in innovation. That's why you see the investments in AI so important. That's why you see $5 billion invested in research, in universities, in postdocs, in students, and there's a lot more.
There is a lot of spending in this budget. There is extra revenue because of a better performing economy than projected on budget day last year, or even in the fall economic statement. And there is the revenue and you anticipate to get from the capital gains. But almost all of that, if not all of it and more, gets spent. The spending pace of the government is driving debt servicing costs. It's going to go over 11% by the end of this forecast. It's $64 billion a year. How do you justify continuing to deficit spend at this rate?
Well, as you pointed out at the beginning, David, we set ourselves some very specific, very clear, time-limited fiscal guideposts in the fall economic statement. A lot of people you talked to had a lot of questions before the budget about whether we would meet those guideposts. We have. That is incredibly important because the Governor of the Bank of Canada said having those guideposts in place was important to him, important in creating the conditions that will make it possible for interest rates to come down. We have done that. And I really want to emphasize, Canada today has the most fiscally responsible economic policy in the entire G7. We have the lowest deficit. We have the lowest debt. We have a AAA rating. That is the measure of the fiscal responsibility of this government. You talk about the investments we're making. I'm glad you are, David, because our country needs investments. We need to invest in housing. We need to invest in affordability. We need to invest in economic growth. And that is not, some kind of eccentric partisan view. When we saw the budgets of BC, of Ontario, of Quebec, a progressive government, two center-right governments, all three made the decision that Canada right now is a growing country and needs investment. We agree. We're supporting their investments with infrastructure investments. We're making investments of our own. The only difference is, in contrast with those provinces, the federal government is making our investments in a fiscally responsible way, because that is fair, and that's about not saddling younger Canadians with debt.
Well, on that, British Columbia had a credit rating downgrade by the major rating agencies because of its spending and its debt levels, and people are looking aghast, I think, at what they're seeing in Ontario and Quebec on the conservative side of the political argument. You talk about this being about fairness for the next generation. By 28-29, $64 billion a year just in interest on servicing the debt. How is leaving an interest payment like that to the next generation fair to them?
It's a really important point to make, David, that Canada's fiscal policy is not just a little bit more responsible than the rest of the G7. We are overwhelmingly the most fiscally responsible country right now. We said that we would have a declining debt to GDP ratio. We are showing that across the fiscal framework. That means our debt is getting smaller every single year. We said we would have a declining deficit. We are doing that. And to give people a little sense of things, this year we are saying our deficit will be 1.3% of GDP. In the United States, it is going to be well above 5%.
But they're a reserve currency in the global economic superpower, so the circumstances are different.
That's why we are running a much more responsible fiscal policy. But we are not just more responsible than the U.S. Our debt and deficit are more responsible than Germany, than France, than the U.K., than Japan, than Italy. Just look at the numbers. And as I say, this is not like, there are issues where we can have a partisan debate, where people can say, I believe in small government or I believe in bigger government. I believe in higher taxes or I believe in lower taxes. But truly, when it comes to the fiscal responsibility of our government, we are meeting our marks. The ratings agencies are recognizing that with a AAA rating. And I want Canadians to have the security that comes from knowing the necessary investments that Canadians need, the investments in housing, the investments in affordability, the investments in economic growth, the investments in fairness for all generations are based on a remarkably responsible fiscal foundation. That's the reality.
Let's just talk about the housing agenda. We got the strategy on Friday. It's all bundled together. It's about $23 billion combination of spending and loans, as I added up over the course of this framework. So much of it, though, are not levers that you can push and pull as a federal government. You need the provincial governments and municipal governments to be on board. But more importantly, Minister, at a time when you're dealing with immigration numbers that got too high under this government, you need a workforce to build these homes, and labor threatens to be a constraint on this agenda in the time frame that you've set out. How confident are you can execute on this? Because the aspiration is clear, but the execution of it is not necessarily something you can completely control from here in Ottawa.
Sure, David. You're totally right. We don't completely control housing. I described it today as a great national project. This is something that's going to take the federal government, provinces, municipalities, private sector, public sector. Everyone's going to have to pull together. But I have to say, I am extremely optimistic when it comes to housing. I think that over the past 6 months, as a country, we have really had a revolution in our thinking about housing. The main challenge with housing actually is not the money. It's not even the workforce. Those are both important things. The big challenge is the red tape and the zoning. We need to be a country that believes in getting more homes built and creates the conditions that allows Canadians to do that. And I have seen a transformation in how Canadians, in how municipalities, in how provinces, and just how people are thinking about it. People are embracing gentle density. People are saying, let's cut the red tape. Because I think Canadians feel, as probably you and I do, we want young Canadians. We want our younger brothers and sisters. We want our friends and neighbors. We want our kids and their friends to be able to afford a home of their own. That means we have to build more homes faster, and that is something our government is absolutely committed to doing.
Okay. There's $500 billion in your budget, so we could talk about this for a long time, but I know we're out of time. So Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us.
Thanks a lot. Really nice to talk to you.
Thank you.